Welcome back everyone, and hope you found the stop frame interesting and hopefully inspiring. So look, just going to take a little bit of time, just a few minutes, just to get a bit of formal instruction on applying these coloured pencils, this variety of fantastic sort of array of colours through coloured pencil drawing. So I've got here a band of primary, which I've pre-prepared, primary yellow. And I'm going to now, with a pre-prepared sharp pencil, I'm going to simply add another primary. There it is. Now, this sort of working is quite, a lot to be said for just sort of practicing, finding a bit of time in your sketchbook just to find out the handling of these pencils and their combinations. Now, this addition of this other primary, the red, to the yellow, begins to, I'll blend a little bit with the yellow. It starts to induce a secondary. Now, I'm not teaching here colour theory, but all this colour theory really has its basis in French Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. So there's plenty to research. You can just put that into one of your favourite search engine at home, and you'll find lots on French and post-French colour theory. It's really where we have all the basis of the 20th century learning, in the formal learning in art schools and so on, in use of colour. So look, take time, take time to do some research, but most importantly, the handling of the very pencils you have at hand to work with. And you can see that I've now begun to induce a secondary. If I continue that, if I take another primary and find out what happens there, then something else starts to happen, doesn't it? That blend, that natural sort of blending of pencil against pencil, really important that we start to learn a little bit about the pencils and their working properties. So I think there I'm already demonstrating the possibilities of and the importance of layering, putting one colour against another colour. Very important. Okay, now look here, I got a secondary. What happens if I was to use here? It's complementary. Let's do something like that, and I'm going to get something else occurring, a whole width and bandwidth of other relating colour and other possibilities within there. You see, so this is really important. You begin to sort of fashion and know exactly the working properties of the pencil. During the course of a drawing, I'll always swatch. I'll always test a pencil on a piece of rough paper just to make sure of the colour and the colour combinations that I'm perceiving in the subject. Very important. I'm just using another primary here, and I'm quite interested in a sort of other secondary that may be appearing, and it's really about that. It's about the sorts of combination. Let's do something else now with the mark making. Let's go across in this direction. So now I'm cross hatching, getting a much denser mark. So if I move to this third band, which I've already pre-prepared, you'll see here that I've gone for a very light sort of additive primary through to what may be induced as being very dark, dare I say black. Well, yes, layer upon layer, these pencils will create all sorts of possibilities and shades and perceptions in colour, your sort of colour tuning, as I call it, your personal colour frequency to the subject. And yes, if I mention black, well, there's something I'm just going to specify, that in this drawing we're going to try, certainly we're not going to use black. I'd like us to try to experiment without leaving black aside, not making your own blacks up, what I call the chromatic black, far more creative and more interesting. Be warned, using black certainly too early on in the drawing will kill the colour. So that's that first tip. Now I'm going to take this theory into a descriptive passage in a few moments, so catch up with me there and we'll have a look. Very good everyone. So going to put some of that earlier colour sort of practice theory, which you've had time to go over and research and so on, into a little demo here of some shapes, some basic shapes, pre-prepared. Now, first thing to notice, look at the drawing, the line drawing. It's ever so faint, almost invisible. Yeah, and the other thing about that line drawing is that you use the very colour pencil range that you're going to use for the whole drawing. Don't make the mistake of using graphite. It's a different medium, and the graphite will dirty your colours. We're going to keep the colours as pristine as possible. So there's a rule already for you, is keeping that that line drawing of anything you're going to work with. Use the same set of colour pencils. And the colour, well, I quite often use a very light blue. You could use a warm, it could be a very light pink. It's just visible, something that's just visible from the paper, just something that, and it's to do with the subject matter. If you perceive it as being a cool subject, then you probably use a cool colour. If it's a warmer subject, you'll use a warmer coloured pencil to draw the outline. Once you're happy with the outline, you start to draw and render the form. And another very essential device is what I call a clean leaner. Clean leaner. Yeah, you've got to have a piece of paper that you can lean against. It's clean. I've got greaseproof paper here, so I'm not smudging and not leaving any sort of grease marks on the paper. Keep the paper pristine, and we're working from light, another rule, to dark. Yes, just as these bands before, it's light to dark is how we progress with the range of colour pencils at your disposal. So here I have a cylinder, a cube, and a cone. And some of you who may have gone on to relate to some of the contextual art history of colour, you might have come across the very artist that there's a very famous quote of a post-impressionist artist that has been used by the modernists of the 20th century, that transition to the modernist approach of art and colour theory. And I'm going to sort of just begin to render this shape. So I'm putting this into practice up here, if you like. I'm just making that sort of demo. So the first task is this. I've got a sort of cylinder to sort out here, and it's hollow. And you're going to see me evolve this in good form, I hope, across the other objects. And it's a sort of signifies a way of demonstrating and working the workings of these very, very lovely pencils. We start to make the form. So, moving on from the cylinder, I've got something visible now as a form, a hollow tube cylinder laid on its side. I'm moving across to this cone shape. It's a little bit more tricky. I'm thinking around this part of the earlier demo, a sense of colour scheme here. And just something to add is sort of directional. We're conscious of our directional shading, the way that we implement our shading, the mark making. And again, I'm emphasising the fact that this sort of sophisticated doodling, has a role to play. You're not wasting any time. I know that you want to launch into that finished work, inspired by the stop frame, hopefully. But it might be just worth, on a smaller scale, modest scale, just familiarising yourself with your palette, with the set of pencils you have at your disposal, and their working properties. Really important. Do spend a little bit of time considering, colour schemes, the sort of touch, mark making potential, the very tools of the job. These are all aspects of a successful outcome to your coloured drawing. We see here the cone beginning to be rendered and completed. What's very important, everyone, is to make sure of that directional light. In this little crude diagram, quite obvious. The light is raking from the right, hitting these made-up objects, and the shadows consequently cast to the left. So really, that's it. That's a sort of quality that we're looking towards creating in our final finished drawing, from whatever subject we choose to work from. And clarity of your mark making, making sure of sharp pencil points, keeping from light to darker pencil rendering. All this exemplified by this little test sheet. I hope it's gone some way to demonstrating the sort of qualities available to you with these colour pencils, and the progressive nature of the application of these pencils. Patience, everyone. Take time. It's about observation. It's really around that sense of position, of mark making to the objects that you'll draw, and perceive their forms, their different characteristics, and give life to. Essentially, we want that sense of vibrancy and use of colour. So do take a little bit of time to study, as I've laid out, the impressionist, post-impressionist colour theory. I will in time hopefully supply a video with my own interpretation of that to make more point and give more guidance towards that use of colour. I really look forward to seeing your outcomes. Do post them for me to see. And success with colour pencil drawing.